You only have a career because of us. That house should belong to Sierra. That's what my aunt told me, at the dinner I hosted, in the home I paid for, the one she just gave away. I'm Julia. I'm 33, a licensed architect based in Austin, Texas. For the past decade, I've worked like hell to build a life from nothing. When I say nothing, I mean growing up in a single-bedroom trailer with my Aunt Karen and Uncle Ron after my mom passed when I was 10. They took me in, raised me with their daughter Sierra, and for years, I believed they saved me. I spent most of my childhood trying to earn that kindness. When I got my first big contract 4 years ago, I called Aunt Karen before I even told my friends. I cried on the phone, overwhelmed, grateful, excited. She told me, "You deserve it, sweetheart." And I believed her. So, when their old house, the one we all lived in, came up for sale, I made the full cash offer. $210,000, no mortgage, no split ownership. I bought it outright because they'd never been able to afford repairs, and I wanted to give them peace. I moved them back in, paid for renovations, replaced the roof, even added a back patio for Uncle Ron to sit with his morning paper. I told myself this was how you honor family, how you repay love. Then came the dinner. It was meant to be a small family celebration. My firm had just landed a university project, and I wanted to share the news. I cooked everything myself. Roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, baked mac and cheese, Aunt Karen's favorite. Sierra, her daughter, even brought wine. We sat around the reclaimed oak table I designed and built with my own hands. Everything felt warm, familiar, like the old days. Until Karen stood up, glass in hand, and smiled that thin, tight-lipped smile she reserves for when something's about to land hard. "We have an announcement," she said. "We've signed over the house to Sierra. It's in her name now." I stared at her, certain I misheard. "You what?" Sierra didn't look at me. She just swirled her wine and said, "It makes sense. I'm the one who's going to stay here long term." "The one staying doesn't matter," I replied, my voice already shaking. "It's my house. I paid for it." Karen placed her hand on mine, as if calming a child. "Sweetheart, we raised you. We gave you everything. You wouldn't have that career if we hadn't made sacrifices." My stomach twisted. "That's not how this works." She tilted her head, condescending. "Of course it is. You're successful now. You owe it to the people who got you there." That's when it hit me. They never saw the house as mine. They saw it as theirs. Always had. I was just the wallet. I excused myself from the table before I said something I couldn't take back. In my room, the guest room, I opened my banking app. My heart thudded as I scrolled through the wire transfers. $110,000 on closing day, another $35,000 for the roof, $17,000 for the kitchen, $12,000 for electrical rewiring. And those were just the big ones. $210,000, all from me. No cosigner, no joint ownership, nothing. And yet, somehow, they'd transferred the deed to Sierra. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling fan, listening to its soft hum as memories flickered in my mind. Christmas mornings in this living room, Aunt Karen wrapping hand-me-down gifts in Sunday comics, Uncle Ron fixing my science project at midnight, Sierra braiding my hair before the middle school dance. And now, they'd erased me from the very thing I built for them, rewritten the story to paint me as some ungrateful outsider. At 3:14 a.m., I received a message from Sierra. "Hey, just wanted to let you know I'm redoing the guest room. Can you grab your stuff sometime this week?" I stared at the screen, my mouth dry, hands cold. They weren't just stealing the house, they were evicting me from it. But I wasn't leaving quietly. Let them enjoy their celebration. They had no idea the storm I was about to unleash. I stared at that message from Sierra for a full 5 minutes. "Can you grab your stuff sometime this week?" Like I was some random tenant, like I hadn't poured every ounce of myself and every dollar into that house. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, from rage. I had bought that house so Aunt Karen and Uncle Ron could retire without worrying about rent or repairs. I'd done it because I thought I owed them for raising me. But standing there, reading that message, I realized something. Gratitude had turned into expectation. Then entitlement. Now full-blown theft. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed my suitcase and quietly packed up my things, my laptop, a few clothes, and the framed photo of my mother from the nightstand. The rest? Let them keep it. I knew what mattered, and what was coming next. I drove straight to my apartment in Austin. I'd been renting it out while traveling for work, but it was still mine. The moment I stepped inside, I collapsed on the floor and cried harder than I had in years. Not because I was weak, but because I had finally seen the truth. They never loved me the way I loved them. When I woke up the next morning, my eyes were swollen and my back ached from sleeping on the carpet. But my mind was clear. Crystal clear. I started digging. I went through every bank statement from the last 4 years. Every renovation invoice. Every wire transfer. I built a spreadsheet that tracked every cent I had poured into that house. $210,000. Not a gift, a purchase. One with records, receipts, and legal documentation. Or so I thought. When I pulled up the deed from the county recorder's office, my heart dropped. The property had never been transferred into my name. Not once. Instead, 4 months ago, just after I wired the final renovation payment, it had been legally signed over to Sierra Grace Matthews, my cousin. Kicker? The transfer listed my name as the witness. I'd never signed a thing. I called a friend from college, Calvin, now a real estate lawyer in Houston. I forwarded him everything. 20 minutes later, he called me back, his voice low and tense. "Julia, they forged your signature." I stood there, silent, my hand gripping the phone until my knuckles turned white. "This is felony-level fraud. If you want to press charges, we have a case." I didn't respond immediately. I just nodded to myself. A case. A paper trail. Real consequences. For once, I wasn't the one cleaning up the mess. I was holding the matches, and they were sitting in the middle of a gasoline-soaked lie. Over the next few days, I collected everything. Emails, text messages, receipts, even voice notes of Aunt Karen thanking me for making the house ours again. I documented everything. But while I worked, they got bold. Karen posted on Facebook a long, dramatic message about sacrificing everything to raise a niece who forgot where she came from. Dozens of relatives chimed in with sympathy and heart emojis. Sierra posted a video tour of my kitchen, calling it our new forever home, thanking her amazing parents for this blessing. Then, I got a text from Uncle Ron. "Let's not make this ugly, Julia. We're family. Just let it go." Let it go? They forged my name, stole my house, then painted me as the villain. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to Calvin. Then something strange happened. An envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single folded page. Printed on it, in black and white, was a scanned copy of the forged deed. At the bottom, circled in red ink, was the fake signature, Julia Lynn Matthews. A sticky note was attached. Just 2 words. "Thought you'd want to know?" No name, no clue who sent it. But the implication was clear. Someone close to them had turned. I stared at the note for a long time. "Thought you'd want to know?" The scanned deed was damning enough, but whoever sent this wanted me to see what they did, to feel the violation. That signature, my name, wasn't even close to my actual handwriting. They hadn't even tried to make it believable. They didn't think I'd ever look. I showed the document to Calvin, my lawyer friend. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "They're either incredibly confident or incredibly stupid. Either way, we'll use this." The next day, I filed the paperwork to formally contest the property title, based on fraud. Calvin warned me it could get messy. "This might tear your family apart," he said. I laughed. "That assumes there's anything left to tear." The case was filed quietly. I didn't post about it. I didn't text anyone. I wanted to see what they'd do when the first letter arrived. It took 2 days. Aunt Karen called first. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was syrupy, laced with artificial concern. "Julia, sweetheart, I don't know what this legal nonsense is, but surely we can talk it through. No need to involve lawyers. We're family. Call me." I didn't. That night, I scrolled through Sierra's Instagram. She was hosting a celebration dinner on my patio. Candles lit. Twinkling lights I'd installed myself. Champagne flutes raised in a boomerang loop. Captioned, "Everything we deserve." I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. The next week, I received an anonymous tip through a burner email. Subject line, "Thought you should see this." Attached was a recording, grainy but audible. It was Aunt Karen's voice, clear as day. "She's too sentimental to fight us. She still thinks of us as parents, but this house is ours now. Let her whine." Sierra's voice chimed in, laughing. "She should be thanking us. She owes her entire life to you." I stared at my screen, sick to my stomach. They weren't just manipulative. They were cruel. They planned this. I gave everything, and they counted on that. The next few days blurred together. My lawyer moved fast, filing for a temporary injunction to stop them from selling or altering the property. We had a court date within 2 weeks. I kept it quiet. I wanted them blindsided. Then, out of nowhere, Sierra reached out. She asked if we could grab lunch and talk things through. I agreed, curious to see her angle. We met at a cafe downtown. She wore a designer jacket I recognized because I bought it for her graduation. She slid into the seat across from me, all smiles. "Jules, I've missed you." I didn't say anything, just waited. She leaned in. "Look, I get it. You're hurt, but dragging this through court? It's embarrassing. For everyone." I blinked. "For you, maybe," she scoffed. "You really think a judge is going to care? You gave us that house." "No," I said calmly. "I paid for that house. And you forged my signature." Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Then she smiled again. "That's a big accusation." I reached into my bag and slid a printed copy of the recording across the table. "This isn't an accusation, it's evidence." Her smile cracked. "Just slightly. Where did you get that?" I tilted my head. "Wouldn't you like to know?" Sierra stood abruptly, her voice low and furious. "You're going to ruin everything." I leaned back. "Number you did." She stormed out. I didn't follow. The next day, something even more unthinkable happened. I received an unmarked envelope at my apartment. Inside were screenshots of text messages between Aunt Karen and the notary public, who signed the fake deed. Karen, "Don't worry, she'll never check. Just use the sample signature I gave you." Notary, "Won't this backfire?" Karen, "She owes us. She won't fight." But that wasn't the twist. At the bottom of the page was a final message, circled in red. "I'm sorry, I didn't know what she'd do next." Sent from Sierra's number. "Comment the number 1 if you want to see how Sierra will pay for this. I've always believed revenge should be surgical, clean, precise, undeniable. This wasn't about payback out of spite. This was about restoring the balance they thought they could destroy. With Sierra's anonymous leak, I had what I needed. Proof that the notary was complicit. Proof that the forgery was premeditated. And proof that my own aunt orchestrated the entire thing. What they didn't realize was that I had been building my case not just for court, but for something much bigger. Step 1 was legal. My attorney, Calvan, filed a motion to invalidate the fraudulent deed based on criminal misconduct. We requested an emergency hearing and got it. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted them unprepared. Step 2 was personal. I created a full digital record of my side of the story. Not a rant, not a pity party, just cold facts, bank transfers, invoices, voice recordings, and that damning screenshot from Sierra. The title of the post? How My Family Forged My Signature to Steal the House I Bought Them. Here's the truth. It wasn't rage that guided me, it was clarity. I scheduled it to go live the morning of the hearing. When the day arrived, I walked into that courthouse with my head held high. Aunt Karen and Sierra were already seated, dressed like they were attending a country club brunch. Karen gave me a tight smile. Sierra avoided my eyes. Our case was called. Calvin stood tall, calm, and methodical. He laid out our evidence in order: deed records, the fake signature, the texts, and finally, the recorded audio of Karen planning the fraud. The courtroom went completely still when the judge played the clip aloud. Karen's voice. "She's too sentimental to fight us." Sierra's laughter. "She owes her life to you." Karen tried to speak, but her attorney stopped her. It was too late. The damage was done. The judge ruled in my favor. The title was returned to me, the forgery acknowledged as criminal, and an investigation into the notary was opened. But that wasn't the satisfying part. The satisfying part came when my post went viral. By noon, it was everywhere: Reddit, Twitter, Facebook. Comments poured in. People were furious on my behalf. Even distant relatives began reaching out, horrified by what Karen and Sierra had done. The community that once whispered about how ungrateful I was suddenly had all the receipts. Literally. Sierra lost her job at a lifestyle brand within 48 hours. Her employer emailed me an apology. Karen's charity board announced her voluntary resignation 2 days later. Sponsors pulled out. Her face disappeared from the website. But I wasn't done. I converted the property, not back into a private residence, but into something better. I called it the Haven House, a transitional home for women rebuilding after financial abuse or coercion, fully staffed, fully funded, and yes, fully owned by me. When the story hit the Austin Chronicle, I included one final statement. They took my house. So I built one for women who've lost everything and gave it back to them. I thought that would be the end. But then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope, no return address, just like the others. I almost tossed it out, until I saw the handwriting. It wasn't Karen's. It wasn't Sierra's. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a photo. The paper read, "I've kept quiet long enough. You deserve the full truth." The photo was old, faded, but unmistakable. It was a copy of my mother's will. And scrawled across the bottom, in fresh ink, was a note. Karen destroyed the original. You were supposed to be raised by your mother's sister in Oregon, not her. My blood ran cold. My entire life, everything I thought I knew about who saved me, who raised me, why I owed them, was a lie. I never owed them anything. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the photo of my mother's will. My hands trembled, not from rage, but from something deeper. A lifetime of questions suddenly had an answer. Karen wasn't my savior. She was the one who stole me from the life my mother tried to give me. I had never been meant to grow up in that house. I'd never been meant to live under the thumb of a woman who twisted the word family into a tool for control. The will left my custody to my Aunt Lydia in Oregon. A woman I'd never met. A woman Karen told me didn't want kids. It was all a lie. I sent the copy to my lawyer. He was stunned. "This changes everything," he said. "This isn't just fraud, it's custodial interference. If we prove Karen destroyed the original will intentionally..." I didn't need him to finish. I'd already made my decision. It wasn't enough to expose the forgery, or reclaim the house, or even strip them of their public standing. They needed to face what they'd done, not just in court, in front of everyone. We filed a motion to open a civil case, not for damages, for declaratory relief. We wanted a judge to rule on the validity of the will, to state, on record, that Karen had knowingly concealed a legal document, violating the wishes of a dying mother. When the court date came, the courtroom was packed. Karen looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Sierra sat beside her, pale and expressionless. As evidence was presented, I watched Karen crumble. The forged deed, the audio recordings, the witness testimonies, all of it was bad. But the will was the nail in the coffin. Her voice shook as she tried to explain. I did what I thought was best. Lydia was unstable back then. She wouldn't have. The judge cut her off. That is not your decision to make. The court finds that you knowingly interfered with legal custody and concealed a valid testamentary document. The gavel came down. A ruling of fraud. A recommendation for criminal charges. And a final order. Karen was permanently removed as beneficiary from any legal ties to me or the estate. She lost everything. Sierra tried to defend her afterward in a statement online, claimed it was all a misunderstanding, but screenshots and documents flooded the comments section. There was no recovering from this. Karen's charity dissolved. Sierra's reputation never bounced back. They both became pariahs in the very social circles they used to flaunt in front of me. But that wasn't the ending I wanted to share. The real ending came months later, when I stood on the front porch of the Haven house, watching the first family move in. A woman and her teenage daughter, escaping a financially abusive household, starting over. The same way I had. I gave them the keys, smiled, and said, "You're safe here." After they went inside, I sat on the bench in the garden, the one I built myself. I closed my eyes and let the breeze move through the leaves above me. No emails, no court dates, no more Karen, just peace. The next day, I received a letter. It was from Lydia, my mother's sister. I always wondered what happened to you, it said. Karen told everyone you were being taken care of. I searched for years. I'm so sorry, Julia. We spoke on the phone for the first time that week. Her voice was warm, kind, familiar in a way that made me ache. We cried, we laughed, and we planned to meet that summer. I didn't get the childhood my mother wanted for me, but I got the truth. And I finally got to choose who my family was. Because family isn't who raises you, it's who sees you, values you, fights for you. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't in what you destroy, it's in what you rebuild without them. Comment the number 2 if you think Karen got exactly what she deserved. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more true stories like this one.